Hello, everyone. Today I have an amazing a couple, twin flame couple in union, Cameron and Tyrell. I hope I've pronounced your names correctly. How are you doing today?
Doing awesome.
Good.
And you're calling from Arizona today, right?
Yes.
And it's raining, which normally it's really warm. And I'm very excited because I'm going to ask Cameron, especially, and Tarell, all the questions about runner, chaser, divine masculine, divine feminine, everything. Because though I've had one or two people in union, you're my first couple that are actually on the channel. And all the links are going to be underneath, but your TikTok channel is at spiritual hairdresser. And I want to know a little bit about your story. So the background, however you want to share it, before you met, when you everything, just let it out. Let's hear what you've got to say.
Absolutely. Well, I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan. Cameron's from Tucson, Arizona. And so it's been a journey to even connect in the physical side of things. And we met in Las Vegas. And I'll let Cameron go into that and how instantaneous it was and the spark and the connection, unlike anything I've ever experienced in my entire life. But it was a very explosive beginning.
I have been a hairdresser for probably 12 years now, and I was supposed to last minute going on like a work trip, and they I was single and I know he was, and like just at that point in life where like I was like I don't really want to meet anybody. And I was on the work trip and we met on a dating website. I was there for like a week. We connected, but we didn't get to like talk. And then when I went home, he had called me once or twice, and I was like, "Well, I'm not going back to Vegas. This doesn't seem like it's going to be his thing." But he kept reaching out, and we talked for like a month on the phone and like texting. And we would, it was like high school almost. We would talk like 10 hours a night, pull all nighters before going to sleep. I drove all the way to Vegas. It's like a 6.5 hour drive. We met in person and we got engaged the next day.
Oh wow! So was this the first time you met physically, and you got
Yeah.
engaged the
Yes.
next day?
Yeah.
Oh
And
wow!
I
Who
know.
proposed?
And
Who proposed?
yeah. Yep. We got a ring the next day, and it was very unorthodox. And even in the earlier years, like people hearing that were like, "Wow!" But we've been married 8 years now with two separations. But it was unlike anything I've ever experienced. Like the moment I met him, even before meeting him, I there's something about him I just knew. And it's weird because even when I was a kid, I would like it sounds strange, but I would draw like pictures of his eyes, like just in this like maybe my higher self knew this. And then when I saw his eyes, I felt like a serious connection. So,
It was pretty intense.
yeah.
It was one of those connections where like we spoke on the phone and we went deep. Like we dove deep. It was very spiritual. We're both very spiritual in nature. I grew up religious. I grew up in a Baptist church, based on Christianity, and I let a lot of that go, in my 20s before I met Cameron, but I still have that deep connection to spirit and God and just all the things of the Bible, really. I still have a great understanding of it, even though I wasn't living in that way or fashion. I don't think either of us was, but it was just a really strong connection. It was very heartfelt. We talked about the deepest of things from the universe to just our connection. It was very organic, and it felt like we were at home. And so that's why the engagement was just the next step, and ever since then, I don't think we've ever lost that connection as far as feeling like we're best friends, feeling like we can talk about the deepest of things together, and just connecting in many ways.
Or how if we've had a separation or not or up or down, that connection has always been there. Like we've had our own experiences in life to be the people we are, but it like even when we're mad at each other, or like it's marriage, like we have 2 children together, and we still always have had that. Like even coming back into union, like that never even from the moment we like connected again, it's almost like the 8 month separation or 7 month that we had didn't exist. It was very natural.
There's so many things I want to ask you. So many things. Right. I'm going to go back in the past from when you were young, okay?
Okay.
And Cameron, you talked about you used to draw his eyes and you kind of had this innate knowing. And then I want to also ask Tarell, like, how was your childhood and how was it different to before you met? Like, what was going on before you met? And then as you met, were you looking for the one? Like, what was that about? So, yeah.
And I had given up on looking for the one at the time of meeting Cameron. But going back to my childhood, I had some really rough experiences growing up in the city of Detroit. Through high school, my dating my dating life was, I would say, normal in the capacity of having girlfriends and things like that, but they were very traumatic and very intense breakups, and it almost felt like there was an energy of like this cannot go right type of energy. My very first serious girlfriend in college, we we were connected on a deep level, but it seemed like everything went against our relationship at that time. And so that was like the very first serious breakup. I was depressed. I felt like I was grieving. And that spiraled into a lot of self growth for myself. But I would say relationships were very intense and it seemed like things were going against the connection. I really wanted to have that pure, peaceful connection with partners, but it just seemed like something would always get in the way, with whether it was my personal life choices that her or I would make. And I found myself at a point where I said, you know what, I don't want that. I actually would rather just be single and just go out and explore and do my own thing. And as soon as I made that decision, I was about 22 or 23 when I met Cameron. That is when I met Cameron. It just 24, yeah,
That's very
and that
young.
that is
That's very
the time
young.
that we met. Hmm.
That's a very young age. And I wonder if that's the case for most divine masculines, where basically the karmic lessons and the 3D is so overbearing that they get to a stage where they do not want to be with a woman. And like the whole templates of what a feminine is very distorted. And I wonder if you had the similar sort of distortions growing up, like with parents or siblings or family members, that basically made you feel like women, for example, are all toxic or not good for you.
Absolutely. I have mother wounds, had mother issues. I felt like my mother was not present in my life. My mom today still battles addictions and things like that. So I've basically understood that dynamic and where it comes from as far as women. I'll even go as far as saying I have personal addictions that I dealt with. And I'm just being real about it. That played a significant role and made a significant impact in my life with my relationship to women. At an early age, I was addicted to sex. I was addicted to substances. But I would say my sex addiction, really started to grow from my earlier years up into my adult years and into my marriage. And that ended up being one of the biggest healing um, moments for me and struggles for me. Is just dealing with the sex addiction and how it stemmed from my childhood, stemmed from the lack of love that I felt that I received from my mother. It stemmed into my behavior, the compulsive behavior of sex addiction, and just basically living this life of women being disposable in that sense due to that addiction. And I was really forced to face it when Cameron and I connected, and that I was forced to deal with that trauma, and it didn't go anywhere. It stayed there, and we had to face it together.
It's interesting because I feel like a lot of divine masculines have addictions, and sex is a big one because they're more lower chakra based. And then
Mhm.
I used to always think that it was due to wanting attention and validation, but recently I had a sort of like realization that actually it stems from this desire of loneliness and needing to be seen.
Mhm.
It's like feeling so alone that you need this, like, because quite often divine masculines have this big harem or big pact that they have around them, right? And it makes them feel bolstered, their ego, and feel seen and wanted. But it's, I don't know, do you feel that's the same? Like it comes from a deep rooted need to be seen because they're so lonely?
Absolutely. I felt so lonely. I would be surrounded by people and still feel very lonely, very isolated. That's a word that Cameron and I use a lot for me to express how I feel or how I felt was isolation. That's what the addiction does, particularly sex addiction, because it's such a shameful and guilty cycle that a person, a sex addict, goes through. It's the sex and the shame, and then it's the pleasure, and then it's escaping that in a very like a way that is just is damaging. You feel powerless. But yeah, the loneliness and the isolation played a huge part in it. And during our marriage, during the roughest times, when you are in a twin flame relationship or union or marriage or even just a relationship in general, as a sex addict, you hurt the people that you love the most. And that is the core of the addiction is the person that you love and care about the most. You can't come clean. You feel like you can't express the suffering that you're going through because inevitably you're hurting that person by letting them know. And that's the cycle that a lot of masculine or men in sex addiction or just in general people who struggle with sex addiction deal with. It's that cycle, hurting the people that you love the most, but not being able to express the suffering. And the suffering and the honesty and the truth is what gets you out of it. So that was a huge part and dynamic.
There's so many distorted templates on earth, and one of them is sexuality and seeing each other as, just pieces of flesh rather than seeing the divine version, which is in a twin flame relationship you're forced to see. So I will go into more of like your own healing journey in a moment, but I want to ask Cameron before we move forward. How was your childhood? How was your like thoughts before you met Tyrell? Were you looking for that special romance? What did you have a really? Because quite often twin flames have very traumatic, unfortunately traumatic childhoods.
Yeah. I I think he said it best too. Like he has mother wounds and I had father wounds. Although my dad was like always there and my parents were married, my dad had a lot of trauma and was very emotionally unavailable. I can see my mom being that way too, but I think the focus is like just, if your father's not there as a girl, you're always kind of searching for this like, and I wasn't protected as a child. I was molested at 4 years old. And then at 12 years old, another family member attempted to do something on my dad's side. So I had a lot of masculine wounds, and those are things that I've worked through and healed. But at the time, like I've had many relationships where I felt like that like the that I was choosing, like now I come to realize were very emotionally unavailable. And so it was like this energy that kept going from like one person to the next. And I was like desperately searching for this love that I didn't get as a child, I feel. And so when I had bumped into him, like I was at that point where I was like, I'm not looking, like I had kind of surrendered. I was just like, I'm not even looking, like, and at that time, like, just putting the website on or like the dating site, like it was pure boredom or, but I wasn't searching, and I really had sworn off. I'm like, I'm never getting married, and I never want kids, like, and then bam, like that just slapped me in the face, like I didn't ask for it.
So when you saw the profile, was there an initial like, oh, was there like an attraction? Was there like a sense of something different? Was there like an energy behind it or something?
It was his eyes. Um, I I've always felt strangely spiritual since I was a kid. Like I grew up very different than a lot of kids. I was fortunate to grow up on a ranch in deep, like in the mountains of Mexico, with my dad. And I although I have a half sister who's 8 years older and lives across the country, like I pretty much was an only child, so I never had anyone around my age. I always seemed to be passed over to like my parents worked a lot, so I was with my old grandmother at the time who was Mormon. So that was kind of my background, like I although I wasn't like pushed to go to church a lot, she did push a lot of as a child, like she would have all these videos and DVDs of like a spirit, God, and she would teach me patience, like certain values that kind of stuck with me. But I was very alone, like, and I've always felt that way in my own way as a feminine. Like, I just, my parents worked all the time. They were both emotionally unavailable. My half sister, the one I did, lived across the country with her mom. We didn't have a strong connection, and then, so I had all these things where I've always felt alone and misunderstood. And so that's kind of where my things play in.
And then when people are asking questions like, I don't know whether he's my twin flame. I have doubts. Is it a soulmate? Is it a karmic? And I did an interview, the last interview, one of the interviews I've done, the interviewer was talking about all sorts of types of twin flames, which I've never heard of before. But how did you come across the term? Are there any signs that you like? Did you realize? Were there doubts?
I think me and him always kind of understood like spirituality and like deeper connections. I had never come across like the meaning of twin flame per se until around the energy that I became more of a chaser. Like
Oh,
I had always been naturally kind of an anxious attachment because of my childhood. Like, like if no one was there for me, I'm trying to get this, and then he grew up with like five siblings. He needed space. He needs like and but with our different lifestyles, like we didn't have the capacity to explain our needs to each other, whether it's marriage or not. And so I would say I started kind of understanding that like before our second separation. And I had said to him, I was like, I think you're my twin flame. And it pushed him really, he was like, no. And then kind of ran even further.
get
So
away. So Tyrell, are you more avoidant then? Would you say? Because most they say it's avoidant and anxious, right? And then have you?
100%. Yeah. Yeah. 100% avoided. I didn't learn about the twin flame union until about a year ago, I would say.
yeah.
I've seen things up online, but I didn't really understand the concept in depth until about a year ago.
So I want to.
And
Yeah, carry on.
mhm, absolutely, yeah, I was, and then I started. But the only reason that I understood and really recognized the twin flame was just due to the deep work that I was going through the past 2 or 3 years. It was intense, unlike anything I've ever experienced. And I understood that this has to be there has to be a reason for this. Like me facing these deep, dark things that I've kept deep inside myself for my entire life. Everything was coming to the surface. Everything was crashing and burning. Everything was like a purge. And I was like,
It's a
this,
rebirth.
okay,
It's a rebirth.
yeah,
It's a baptism.
yeah. I was like, okay, I understand like the dark night of the soul, but this deals with her, and I cannot escape her.
um,
And it would just, she just put a mirror up to myself, and I had to see every single
same.
thing that I've been running from my entire life.
I want to
It
get
got
yeah.
louder and louder.
I want to get into this. So your journey is a little bit. Every twin flame journey is slightly unique. Your journey is you meet, you get married, which is different because normally there's a bubble phase and then they split up. So anyway, who proposed to who first? That kind of
I proposed to Cameron. We actually proposed to each other. We were walking by Zales the second day after the second day of meeting each other. And we were walking by Zales in Las Vegas, and I grabbed her arm and I was like, let's go in and look at some rings. Went into the Zales shop. Gentleman sales guy, super nice, sold us. He was like, hey, we have this ring. It's $1,500, and we loved it. It was such a beautiful ring. I think to this day we cherish that ring. And I didn't have enough money to pay for it. It was actually bought on Cameron's credit card, and so she looked at her account, and what happened that day?
So there's so many things that have blessed us in so many weird ways. But that specific day, ironically, my credit limit went up like 5,000 or 3,000 that day.
It's the
And
divine, I tell you, the divine intervened.
everything in our entire 8 years has always been divine. Even the union, like coming back, and
Synchronicities go like so
it
many
got louder and
synchronicities.
louder. Even through separation, I can vouch that my personal synchronicities and the pain of separation, although I started going in my own, finding myself and detaching, like it just would get louder and louder and louder, like in a weird way.
I will ask you that question about manifesting, because they say once you raise your vibration and you surrender, and then also once you're in union, oh my god, the twin flames I know in union, they have money and they have success and they have joy and they have all the things, right, that you want. It comes to you. But so okay, so no, Tyrell proposed to Cameron, but Cameron bought her own ring. Okay, Tyrell, did you pay for the ring eventually?
No, it was charged on Cameron's credit card, and we went into unionship from there.
Yeah.
My bills became her bills, and vice versa, and that's how it went.
So when you got married, did you stay, like, because you live in different places? So how did you move together?
Yeah, so I was working in Las Vegas at the time. Cameron was based here in Tucson, Arizona, and so fortunately at that time I was able to relocate my job to Tucson. I had never been here before, and I transferred. So it was easy. Another synchronicity, another divine intervention. My job said, "Hey, yeah, you can transfer to Tucson," even though we never do that, even though we never approved that. I had only been on the job for less than 3 months, and they went through the paperwork and transferred me, which never happens. So I was at that point, and we were at a crossroads. Like, if we can't be together physically, how are we going to make this work? But it did work out in our favor.
So you moved to Tucson, Arizona, which I'm gonna assume, I don't know about Tucson, but is it? It's not like Detroit, right? It's different.
No, we're out in the desert.
It's all desert, everything. Phoenix is the major city. We're about an hour south of Phoenix.
So obviously, with twin flames, you tend to have age gaps, culture gaps, location gaps, all sorts of gaps. And I'm making a video on this. But moving, obviously, you've got your different cultural backgrounds. Was that an issue when you moved to Tucson?
I don't think it was an issue. We were very, very open as far as our differences in culture and ethnicity and things like that. We both had a lot of experience in that area. It was more so our families and our surroundings, and just like living a life with having interracial children, and experiencing all of the shortcomings and the adversities and challenges of that.
I mean, you're a
Even
very
though
beautiful couple, but I can imagine that there are people discriminate, And so you moved to Arizona, and then how long were you together before your separation?
So I'll throw a little thing in there too. We got pregnant right away. And so our daughter was in our first year of our like our beginning of our marriage. And I would say right around the time that she was 1 was our first separation. And that was maybe almost a year or two, kind of like 8 months or something. So that was
What caused the separation? Like, obviously you talked about a lot of mirroring. There's a lot of, at the beginning, a lot of unresolved stuff, and the fact that you lasted a year before you separate is a miracle. It is a miracle, because people only last a few weeks, right? So during that time, you were pregnant, you were newly married, you moved.
Oh, it was intense.
Yeah, and then you were having all the mirroring. I'm assuming all the triggers happening. Was that happening?
Yes. Yeah.
So absolutely. I think a huge trigger that for the first separation came from my side. I was at that time diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I had a manic episode where I was looking to escape the country, escape the marriage, and it was a huge situation. It was a crisis point, not only personally but for our marriage. And then so after that, we tried to do counseling, and I don't think we were in a place of agreement at that time, and we decided to separate. It lasted about 6 months to a year, somewhere in between there, before we rejoined.
So
I
during,
think
yeah, tell me about your separation. Go on, Cameron.
I think too, it a lot of when I look back right now, like the first separation is very kind of it's just a smaller version of this past separation. Where like I think of whether it's hard when you're pregnant and you have hormones already, or like you just had a baby. I had severe postpartum depression, so she was actually about 3 months ish when that had really gone into play. But a lot of it happened during pregnancy too. But I could say easily that I was even in then I was in an anxious attachment phase, and like he was more new avoidant, right? And it I just kept trying my best to keep us together. And then when we did separate, I had moved out and he was alone, and it was very similar construct to this time. And I kind of had to detach, and because I had a baby, like I was like, I need to step. We have a baby, but as a mother, like I was like, I can't fixate on this right now. Like I'm in the newborn stage. I got to be there for her. And so it kind of helped me to detach a little bit. But even one time he said that like he called me when he was at a low point, and I answered. And I think we kind of tried after that to like work, like it work on some stuff. And then we joined again.
And it plays to that isolation and loneliness that you spoke of.
Yeah.
During that separation phase, it just seemed like not only was I separated from Cameron and my family, but it felt like I was separated from the world. I felt so lonely, so isolated, and I reached out to Cameron, and just that conversation kept everything alive, and we made that decision to rejoin.
So did you stay in Arizona or you moved back to Detroit?
I stayed in Arizona the
Okay.
entire time.
And then you were visiting your child, I'm assuming, and having co-parenting. So in a way, your journey has been sort of almost predestined to keep you coming back over and over again, marriage and kids, and so that's quite interesting. So during the separation period, so I know with you, Cameron, you've got a newborn, you've got hormones. Tyrell, you've got bipolar disorder. You're probably taking medication. Were you getting any therapy, any family support? Were you doing any inner work at that time?
Absolutely. Going very deep. Crisis point for my entire life. My dad, my mom, they flew out. It was that coming to Jesus meeting, so to speak. Hey, this is what I'm struggling with. This is what I have been struggling with my whole life, Dad. Like, sex addiction and the things that I was into, and playing into the manic events. Just coming clean about a lot of those things to my family and a therapist. I still have that same therapist today. So she has the track record of the entire journey, and just beginning that journey with her was very, very important. And becoming aware of the mental disorder and awareness of bipolar disorder, and making sure that I protect myself and keep myself in a good, healthy state, in a balanced state. Definitely turned to my faith and dove deep into a lot of the spiritual teachings, into meditation and many things and practices that I still do and use today.
And that's very fortunate that you were spiritually bound and you had all these sort of like things to fall on, like God, because a lot of divine masculines at times don't even have that. And I feel like the only thing that gets you through is your faith, because the journey is so horrific. It is. And especially if you've numbed or avoided or ran away or put addictions in place to cope, it's like it all comes up to the surface. And how long was your first separation? Was it 8 months? Was it?
roughly, because and I think too, looking back, like I can easily say, and he could probably contest to this too, is like if we didn't have her, I don't think our journey would, like she was kind of that bridge that really kept us committed. Like when you have a child with somebody, like although you're going through your own things, like he still wanted to be a dad, like and so that kind of helped us recommit at that time. But I think if we didn't have any kids, like I think our journey would have been twice as hard, like or longer separations. I
Yeah.
think it was just kind of like a tie-in, but I would say it was about 8 months, and then we started going to therapy and this and that, and we had a phase that's like 5.5 years or 6 years of still working, like working together and having another child eventually, but still struggling with things that were still there until the next separation, which was the past 8 months again.
So three separations, but
Two, sorry.
two.
Yeah.
And the thing is, yeah, I agree. Maybe you would have had longer separations, but I also believe you would always be brought back. And
Mm.
Cameron, what kind of healing were you doing? So Tyrell's told us the sort of inner work, and there's quite a lot of inner work you're doing, Tyrell, because some of the divine masculines don't want to do the inner work. They want to avoid and be a bachelor, a playboy, and they usually say the divine feminine is leading, and that's why the masculine is doing the work. So Cameron, were you doing inner work to get Tyrell energetically to catch up?
Yeah. I would say the first one, not so much. I think it was just a lot of internalizing and just like maybe like a higher faith that showed me like to stay committed to it. That's something that I couldn't comprehend. But like being busy with a baby, like I had always adorned him in some higher way. I just maybe didn't understand it. But I would say the second separation, I did so much inner healing. It was about August of this past year is when we, and our situation's harder. So we live in this house and we had put it on the market to sell because he wanted a divorce, and I was being that anxious attachment that was like, no, I don't want that, like, and no matter, and he's like, I have free will, and like, and I would, in the fears, and like so I lost my father 4 years ago to suicide. And so this has, since then I was already, that made me go into a spiritual uptick of finding myself and healing some things. And so since 4 years ago, I've kind of naturally already progressed in certain ways. But when he wanted to separate, I think the anxious ticked up because I had lost my father and now I'm losing him. It's that same wound of abandonment. Um,
And
and
when did that happen, and how long was it, and why did it happen? Why did you want to Tyrell? Why did you want to divorce? What was going on?
Yeah, I'm running from my addictions. Trying to get out of the suffering of having a life of just being untruthful. Trying to in my mind fix it by blaming all of our marital struggles on a way out. Every marriage has, their own struggles, and it was a way for me to pin that on. Hey, we're just not compatible in this area. There's too much pain. There's too much. There's just too much, and we should just go our separate ways and do it for our daughters. And that's the excuse that I told myself. That's the reasoning. But I know deep down I was struggling with this addiction my entire life. And just during that separation phase, I realized that it didn't go anywhere. It was still there. I still dealt with the sex addiction. I still dealt with the loneliness. I still dealt with the attachment to feeling powerless, even in our separation.
So you sabotaged the marriage to avoid your issues, in a sense, and that was, you said, last August. So it's a very short. when did it happen? Because last August was a few months ago.
Yeah, it happened. What would you say? It was about August.
Yeah,
We separated. Yeah.
that was like the final, but we were having some complications like for a few months before that. So um I would say too is like he also at that time introduced me to choosing a karmic energy through his job, and which I still feel like she looked like me too, which was like there's just like these things that like, and it's weird, like my higher self even told him like you're self-sabotaging a good thing. And he had said like she's his twin flame, and like I had said that I was like, no, I think we are because we're having to go through this heavy stuff. And so learning to like once I had to let him make his choice, I had to learn how to completely like detach. And I a lot of the separation was just focusing on myself and like loving myself and healing myself. Like I just went and then I kept studying like twin flame, and my faith in God got stronger. Like I just kept doing all this inner healing, and kind of it just made things a little easier to let go. Like, but then I started feeling almost like obsessive thoughts. We still live in the same house too. Like we have a giant house, but we had to like we didn't talk much, unless it had to do with the kids. Like we were kind of stuck in this stage, and like our house wouldn't sell. Like that was also like it was so many things left and right.
I mean, on one hand, we've talked about how it was fortunate that you got married and had kids so soon, but on the other hand, you had so much being thrown at you at the same time that added to more of the momentum or energy of what's going. It's like it became very intense, I guess. So,
Mm-hmm.
Cameron, how did you detach and surrender? Because people ask this all the time. I have divine feminines who are very obsessed, and you talked about inner healing, children, faith in God. Like, what helped you completely let go?
Um, I think it was just constant education on like my self journey, like reading things to better myself. Like it was detaching from like I need somebody to being okay with like I just need me. And I had to respect like what he wished, like although it hurt so much, like I had to learn to respect it and like not tune into like his behavioral, because I could like we still live in the same house, so there's things that it would come up and it would almost like teach me about triggers, like and I came to the point where like I saw some things that he was still doing and I would just look at it and then I would continue on. Like that's how I knew that I was healing, because that no longer was getting triggered by like his behavior or the things he was doing even in separation.
That's interesting because that's what I keep hearing over and over again. You'll get to a stage. Well, I have got to that stage. Maybe even beyond in some respects, but like in the beginning, the triggers, it's almost like your soul is on fire, or like any other person does it, I don't give a crap. You anyone else, but my twin flame does it, I want to kill them, I want to kill myself.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my god, what is going on? It gets so horrific. So
Yeah.
how you were living together, you were obviously, you must have been triggering each other so bad. So how did you
Yes.
deal with that? And Cameron and Tyrell, like, what was helping you to navigate that trigger?
Yeah, honestly, it was space. Just learning to give each other healthy space and boundaries. That has always been a challenge in our marriage. We got together so fast, and we just melded with each other, right? And it was like we never really gave each other healthy space, and that's what this last separation really gave us. It was the gift of boundaries, of the gift of space, in order for us to learn our own energies and be in our own energies, and also learn to respect the others. I learned so much, and I know we both have, just having that time apart, to find out things that we really are interested in, and dive deep into ourselves and our mission, and just to be able to heal. But I would ultimately say it also gave me the strength to surrender.
Yeah.
Being
Also, okay, so the divine masculine surrenders also. Let's hear about it.
Oh my goodness. that is, if there's one word, one theme that I can, that overarching theme for the divine masculine, as a runner, and I know that I was a runner, is the word surrender.
Yeah.
And I thought of it in such a different way prior to actually surrendering. But when I surrendered, it was surrendering everything, all of me, to Cameron. You know, I thought that my past and my past addictions and all the things that I've done could never be accepted or heard by anyone. And it was the surrendering of being truthful about everything that I've done. It was the surrendering of, hey, like, this is what I've done. This is what I've struggled with. This is why, going back 6 to 8 years. And that is the part that really opened my heart and allowed me to feel that I can be very intimate and close with Cameron. And it changed everything.
Was that very scary? Because like the divine masculines quite often have all these walls and fake life in a way, or dealing coping strategies. And when they meet the divine feminine, they think the divine feminine is going to control them, manipulate them, hurt them, do
Yeah.
this, do that, and then the walls come up. So were you very scared to like let her in?
Oh my gosh, I still am. It's very scary. It's very it's terrifying. It's the worst fear. Like I mentioned earlier, my biggest fear is hurting the person that you love the most. And I know that I've always loved Cameron deeply, and that's where the fear came from, is exposing all of who I am and what I've done to her and having full acceptance. And it also brought me closer to my faith because I was able to surrender myself to God. And it was through that unconditional love, through God, through my faith, through Cameron, which allowed me to feel peace in my heart for the first time in a very long time, if not ever.
It's almost like the human version of us with all our issues and
Mhm.
past and karma and ancestry. That's like the issue, right? That's the problem. But the actual soul aspect of us is like
Mhm.
divine, it's love, it's all pure. But it's that human aspect. And the fear is my humanness going to affect this and mess it up, you know? So,
Yes.
so how important is God on this journey? Because some twin flames, may not like the term God. You can use whatever term you want, universe or whatever. For me, I
Yeah.
used to use the word universe. I've started to use the word God. I feel like if I didn't have faith, I would be dead. It is
Mhm.
such a, it's not like any other relationship, and it pushes you towards that. It pushes you towards your divinity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I use the word interchangeably: God, source, the universe, however you like to describe in your personal journey.
Yeah.
That is everything to me and everything for us. Knowing that love is the equivalence of unconditional love, is the biggest piece for me because it allowed me to feel accepted and be accepted, and then also be able to be truthful to Cameron. And I called it a disclosure. So we named it a disclosure, meaning that I will tell you every single thing that I've ever done relating to my addiction, relating to how I hurt you in our marriage. And that disclosure and that just having that honesty and that truth is what ultimately set me free.
So, with divine masculines, I've heard that they do not like to be quizzed and they'll rebel if you try to ask them things or they won't tell you. Did you have to come to that state of disclosure yourself that you were willing to do it? Like Cameron couldn't like tell me, Tarell, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, that didn't work. That's what had happened the past 8 years, right? Cornering me in
I did that. I
situations
did
and
that.
saying,
I was
"Hey,
pushing
were you
and
doing
yeah.
this? Did you do this? I know you did that. No, I didn't," or just completely hiding it altogether.
Yeah.
It came from me. It came from a deep core wound in my heart that I cannot live a life of truth and honesty without coming and accepting the things that I've done to move forward. Because I realized the addiction cycle, that's what feeds the addiction cycle, is shame and guilt and being in isolation. So it's the disclosure that I came up with on my own through my therapist, but it came through my own heart to do that, to release myself. Because it ultimately, it wasn't even about Cameron. It was about releasing my own soul, releasing myself so I can live a life of peace. Because you go through so much suffering and so much shame and guilt, it is unbearable. And so it was through my own just surrendering to the truth and honesty and just saying, you know what, even if I lose Cameron, even though I'm terrified to lose Cameron or hurt her, I have to do this for me. I have to do this for my own soul.
And then when you get to that state, your relationship, I'm assuming, just gets stronger, deeper, more loving, peaceful, better.
Absolutely.
It's worth it for the people. I get people commenting, why did I sign up for this? Is it even worth it? Should I even stick at it? Should they stick at it?
Oh, it's totally worth
I
it.
would do it all over again, and no matter how painful. And like I was gonna add too, like I had to go through the same things, like my fear of abandonment. Like my dad and mom were married for 28 years, and he left her, and then my mom's husband left her, and then like there's a cycle there that's passed down through the ancestry. And I do believe that like some of the pain we hold in this life is like carried in past lives, or like it's all carried down. And I think that's maybe what the journey is now for the unions that are coming about, or is like it's not just your pain that you're carrying, it's so much deeper than that. And so when at the very end too, I I had to really focus on my feminine aspect of surrendering, like, and with God, like I think I came into that. Although he was doing that on his own, I think I came into it maybe first in some type of way, because I really had to. We all have that little voice inside us that is like, like it's like almost like the ego, or just some voice that tells you like, my whole life I felt incapable of being loved. And so like I had to learn and tell my rewrite over that voice, like I am worthy of this love, or I am worthy of a love of that is unconditional. And I had to truly work on that as the feminine aspect to really believe that. So that's what I was focusing on most. And so once I became that belief and I felt that, I actually felt like I was starting to almost talk to him like through our minds. Like, and so I would send him, once I felt secure in that, I would still send him love, almost like telekinesis wise. Like I would just say, like, surrender and open your heart space. Like I kept saying that almost like as a prayer every day for him, because it was just me wishing, like, I stopped the triggers, I stopped all the things that drove me nuts, and I accepted everything that he was. And to me, that's goes back into God. It's like God loves us unconditionally. And once I learned that, even with the things that had happened, so painful or not, I had a conversation with him, and I was like, I basically, like, I told him to surrender and open his heart, and he I think broke down in that
Yeah,
moment.
you let me know that it's okay. She
Yeah.
let me know that it's okay to let the deepest, darkest part of myself be revealed to her. And that was enough for me to surrender
So
fully.
did you do that verbally, or was it telepathically, or?
I was doing it telepathically often, and I could feel him coming into it. And I feel like that's how strong we are, is like I would do that telepathically as a prayer, and I would pray for him with God, and I gave everything to God. That was my surrendering. I said, God, like all the worries and fears I have, like I give it all to you. And I continue to give that energy to God to heal him in his own way. And then one day I felt it just felt this weird. I felt like I was waiting for God's voice to tell me when I could talk to him. And it was like in that moment, I felt like God gave me the okay. And it was very in a loving space. And I was just like, surrender and open your heart. And he, like, I would say, like, to me, it felt like a collapse. Like, it was just like, oh, you are accepting of me. And like, and then it all the space just kind of broke open. And he and I said, "I love you unconditionally," and it felt like that the what God feels for us, and it was just really beautiful.
Did you get to a stage, either of you, where literally you had surrendered so much that you were okay with whatever happened?
Yes,
Yes,
both
absolutely.
of us.
We talked about that this morning. I said that it can, or yesterday, it comes to a point where like you find so much love in the fact that there is a love that's so unconditional, so powerful, so strong that any fear, the terror of hurting someone, the terror of losing someone is still worth it. It's still worth it to be able to experience that love for yourself. And we all deserve it. And we all deserve to give that to other people as well and to be that for other people. So I even mentioned that yesterday. I said, if I would have lost you, it would still be worth it to come clean and surrender and be and live in truth
Yeah.
because I know that I'm accepted by God, the universe, source. I know that that exists. And just that having that feeling that and knowing that that exists for me, I'm willing to accept the consequences of my actions,
Mhm.
but I still have to be that for you. I still have to give you my truth and understand that there may be consequences to it. But at the end of the day, I know that there's a love that's so great that it was given to me. It exists. And that's what gives me hope.
Did you ever get to a point, and it's a point where I've kind of got to, I mentioned before we started, where it's almost like detachment from life itself, and the 3D. And for me, sometimes I'm like saying, "Oh, I hope I don't manifest death," because I'm so okay to just be with God. I don't know if that is like total surrender, or have I gone beyond total surrender? Because I read it sometimes on Quora where divine feminines are saying, especially that they no longer have attachment to anything, or to the twin flame anymore. It's okay. And when I used to read that a year ago, I was like, no, I must have him. I must be married to him. And now it's like total, it's all gone.
I think that's a telltale sign that you are completely healed within yourself when you can be without another person, like, and still feel whole within yourself. Even if it's not, with being with that person and being in union with that person physically, like the bond that I share with Cameron is so deep that if I were not to see her in this lifetime, I can still live my life in wholeness, knowing that unconditional love exists. It's played a role in my life to bring me where I am today through my suffering. And although, yeah, we could maybe have different partners in the future if that were the case, I can still feel whole within myself. We don't need each other for that attachment, for that trauma bonding, if you will.
And that's the
We
beautiful.
truly love each other because we are choosing to right now.
Yeah.
That's the beautiful
Yeah,
thing about the twin flame journey, which I think no other journey teaches you. It's about unconditional self acceptance and love, and no codependency, no obligation, jealousy, and control, total surrender to the divine. And, it forces you to purify your vessel, right? The only way to be in union is to purify your vessel from all the ancestral, karmic, all the rubbish has to go, right? And I wanted to ask you about, there's a few things I want to ask, but the first thing is, so obviously, when twin flames are together, like you start to get maybe spiritual insight or gifts, or some twin flames see past lives together or see the future. Did you gain any sort of spiritual stuff that happened between you two?
absolutely. I can tell you right now, affirmations for me has become a huge part of my spiritual journey. Knowing that I have the power through Source, through God, to create the life that I want. Peace, love, joy, prosperity, abundance. I affirm those things on a daily basis, and it's a huge part of my life. It's a part of my daily walk, knowing that that I'm creating, and we're creating together.
I would say personally, like, even with the anxious attachment and the controlling aspect of all those years, my intuition was very strong when you say, like, just over time. And I feel like that has gotten stronger, and like the spiritual realm of even like astral projection, or like the dreams I would have of him. Like I've always had like lucid dreaming, or I can remember certain things, and I feel like those have strengthened, and like I kind of work through a lot of spiritual. Like I even the other day, our window was open, and I was so adamant of closing the window, and then a storm kind of came, and he was like, "What? You know, just leave the. We can't figure out which window it is." And I like, but it's like this higher, like this higher.
Knowing.
I always, yep, and I always pray to my ancestors and my spirit guides, and and since my dad's death too, like that heightened a lot, and I almost feel like I hear it. I'm just it's like a exercise, like I'm working on strengthening it, and so like those are kind of gifts. There's a very high spirituality, intuition, things like that for me. Feeling things just strongly, and
Hyper awareness of the spiritual side of everything,
yeah,
like hyper aware of spiritual warfare, negative energies, positive energies. It's just incredible, like how intuitive and sensitive we are
together too.
together,
Yeah.
individually, almost empathic in a way. Like I can feel energy, I can feel, you know, people's vibes and things like that to a certain level, and it's very telling.
It becomes a stage where like you almost feel love for everything, right?
Mhm.
So
Absolutely.
I want to ask you a few questions before we wrap up. So I want to ask you, the first question is, did you lose people, um, lifestyle situations on this journey as you merged, and did you end up merging as more of a one being, like, you know, like you're talking about, like you could feel each other, and did you start to take each other's characteristics and then lose a lot of stuff that wasn't in alignment to that?
Yeah, I feel like in the past few weeks, our connection, choosing the divine union too, and each day making practices to communicate really well, and like and check in with each other too as a oneness. Because I think now working on the union, I feel like we believe in spiritual warfare, and we believe that like there's an energy out there that doesn't want us to have this strength together. And so like we have become very in tune with that, and we've naturally seen on both of our sides just people fall off, or things in our life just completely like because they're not matching our frequency, like our energetic uh thing, union that we're working on, you know. So
Careers ending, relationships, friendships, you name it.
Yeah, because a lot of divine feminines who reach out to me, they were like, "Oh my god, his lifestyle's so toxic or different, and how is he going to ever change? I can't see it ever happening." But you are testament that you can transcend.
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. And it's almost like uh, the source God stepped in to remove a lot of those things, that I thought were good. They weren't, right? Like my job, I realized that a lot of context and ways of being was tied to my career. And I was let go, during this entire second phase of separation. And it ended up being a blessing because now I'm in a position where I have completely different, like new contacts, new job, new career. It's almost like we have a new life. So many things were just fell by the wayside, and it was beyond our control.
I, as a feminine, had to allow that too, though. I think when you see someone, your partner, the masculine, doing these things, I think what I see in the community too is a lot of women struggle and fixate so much. Like, well, he did this to me. It's like the victim mentality, and I had that at points. You know, I'm not perfect. I went through those stages, but you truly have to allow the masculine to live out and play with the karmic energies. And karmic is not just a person, it could be a job, it could be a family member, it could be alcohol, you know, like all that is a karmic situation. And you as a feminine have to kind of bring back your energy into your own divine feminine energy and focus on you, and allow the masculine to really do that. And the more that I did that, and I focused on like healing myself, because if you truly believe that you are oneness in two different bodies, if you're not focused on your own healing and yourself and working on those things first within you, then it's just again mirroring, you know, like it's all shadow work. You have to dig deep, and and look at the parts of yourself that you might not want to face. And I think once the feminine does that, he naturally just kind of started doing it on his own until it started cleansing itself, you know.
And it's that theme again, surrender for the runner. You
Yeah.
have to, at some point, you just have to surrender to the truth, whether that's the truth of your actions, the truth of the situation, the truth of your twin flame. It was again, it was a surrendering.
And it's like oftentimes the masculine is doing the 3D healing work, which is physical, and oftentimes the feminine's doing the 5D, which is internal. And then they get annoyed because why isn't he not sitting and meditating? Why is he with another woman? Why is he doing that?
Yeah.
But you get to a stage. I never thought I would get there, but I think everyone gets there where you literally forgive them because you understand it all.
Yeah.
Like, the attachment to the ego and the illusion and all the nonsense. It's just like when you are angry at another, you hurt yourself
Yes.
and you become free of that. The last couple of questions is I'm going to ask. Firstly, is when you were separated, were there lots of signs and synchronicities? And then what were the union signs? Because someone asked me that question. What are the signs of union? So I want to know that.
Numbers all day long,
All the
everywhere.
time.
I mean, just hitting me upside my face.
Obsessive thoughts too.
144, 444, 333, 1111.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
All
I mean,
day
it
long.
was just incredible. Like, I'm not just talking about, oh, yeah, I'm looking at the clock and I see 444. I would see it on everything, receipts, license plates, random phone numbers,
So
everything.
the masculine sees it also.
Yeah, I
And then
saw it.
and then does because the divine masculine I've heard is the one who returns and makes union happen. So are the union signs like there's more numbers then, more telepathy, more obsession? Like what are the union signs?
I think it was deeper than just the numbers. It was the synchronicity of like events and just the it's almost like the universe is is trying to give you a signal. It was trying to give me a signal based on things that would happen that would lead me into feeling like, you know what, I cannot run from this situation. I can't run from this connection. It came to me in many ways. Things not working out when I would try to do normal things, it would just fail. Or connections that I would try to establish, they would just fail, or just many ways.
And then did you feel they say the masculine feels when the feminine's ready? Did you feel like she's surrendered now and it's time to come back home?
I started feeling it, I would say 2 or 3 weeks before she actually
I did too.
stepped forward and say, "Hey, you can surrender."
Yeah.
I felt that energy in our connection. We just started to seamlessly just come together, just get along, just like, hey, like we were working as a team, just like in so many ways, and it was just effortless. And I just felt like, what are we doing? Like, why are we here? It almost became. It got to a point where I was like, how do we get here? Right? Like, how do we even get to this point? What are we doing?
So Cameron, when he returns, were you like, what were you doing? Or were you just like, when the union happens, there's just no need for words?
Well, and I would add to his too is like our dynamic is harder. Like our house had been on the market for months, and like people we would have walkthroughs, and it was like nope, nope, nope. Like we're like, why is our house not selling? Or like like still divine was kind of working in our subconsciously for like without us knowing was like things like that even, but like we still have children at the end of the day, and like we would only really talk to each other when the children are involved. Otherwise it was completely like space, like he was on the other side of the house living his life, would leave the house, and I would do my own. But those few weeks going into it, like he said, I felt something, and we both kind of agreed that it was like New Year's Day almost, like like the day of the New Year. It was like
Interesting, because New Year's Eve, a lot of divine feminine surrendered totally. But anyway, carry on.
that was me. That was me.
Me too.
And
New Year's Eve.
yeah, and we like I said, ours is different. Like I'm sure so many people out there live in different, like they're separate, but like we have kids, and our every year we would go to a hotel as a family, and like stay at a hotel that night, and so we had to kind of be with each other because of our kids. And it was for me too, like Christmas, so special to us, like with our family and stuff. We've always had great holidays together. So like I surrendered my ego with like how much pain I felt over the years, or how I felt, and so I kind of started slowly surrendering and being kind, just showing kindness and like empathy. And like I made a nice dinner and we watched a movie with the kids. But I felt like this higher self, or like this switch. And I completely started saying to God and praying and like surrendering. And especially the weeks leading up, I would wake up like 4 or 5 times a night. There was one point months ago that I had a panic attack that he had to help work me through at 4 in the morning. Like he was rubbing my back, and it felt like I was dying. And I don't know if it was like some type of deeper connection to him, like. But the last few weeks, it went into that, and so when we talked, we were still kind of like we could both feel it, and I felt it that he was surrendering and I was, and so we started choosing to kind of be kinder to each other. But I think it was still that fear on both sides, like of, does that person accept me? Will, like, with everything that I come with, can I even come to them? And one day I literally just said screw it, and like I felt this need from God to just ask him. Like I looked at him, and I think I touched your chest or something, right? And I was like, surrender and open your heart. And his eyes were like this, like he's kind of like, what's happening? And I was like, how do I have the balls to even say this right now? Because I'm afraid of the like trusting again, and like I had been afraid. I don't want to say I was afraid because I've been working through that, but like it was just this like, just surrender, like both ends. And we just kept talking. We talked for like what, 6 hours that night. And then a few nights after that, talking till 6 a.m., 5 a.m., had to go to work the next day. But it was very mutual, it was very respectful. I held space for him where like I allowed him to be vulnerable. And I think that's what feminine struggled with, was like, and men, the masculine struggles with feeling vulnerable. And so a lot of times I would think of like his inner child is like he had
To see
to,
the
and my inner child, like,
to
that's
see the
something.
to see the innocence, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Before
I
all
feel
this.
the vulnerability was a huge piece, and it just broke open. It just broke open the floodgates. And I give everyone out there hope that our connection, we mentioned that how strong and intense it was in the beginning. It's that strong times like 10. It's just in a different way because we've evolved and we're different. And you may not see, may not be able to tell on video, but that connection is pure. It's actually more pure than it was when we started. It's deeper. It's exciting.
It's
It's,
forgiving.
it's forgiving. It's loving. It's
It's unconditional.
unconditional. It's beautiful, man, and it's worth it.
Yeah.
Which, you know what, with a soulmate you don't have. After 6 months, after a year, the sex is gone. Everything's gone. It's dry. But with the twin flame, it never goes away. It gets more and more and more. Okay, I want to
Yeah.
finish up because we could talk for hours.
Yeah.
I love this interview. It's such a gorgeous couple, such an amazing interview. Just final, I'd like to get tips for the divine feminine, tips for the divine masculine on the journey, and then
I'll go.
yeah.
I'll go first.
Yeah.
Just to be vulnerable, man. Like that is a key. Being vulnerable to your partner, surrendering, and living in truth have been the three keys for success from my perspective, and just being and feeling that love and feeling that deep unconditional love and allowing it is to be vulnerable, and to live in truth. Isolation is not the way to go. It's only going to separate you, make you feel like you're lonely and you're isolated. It's not the way to go. So just be truthful, be vulnerable, and those are huge keys for me.
For myself, I think those resonate as well. Surrender is a big one. I think just on the twin flame journey of like yourself, like being okay with like learning to let it go, accepting the truths that come with it, and don't be afraid of any truth that you have to come into on both ends, you know, like know that like you can't be afraid of them accepting you for all the mistakes you have done either way. Like it's we both I think a lot of times it's like the fear on both ends, like are they going to accept all of me with everything I've done to them or to myself? Am I going to be loved at the end of the day? Like, you know, like, and I think you have to find that in yourself first and truly understand like free will and like and come to the point, and we both did, that we were okay either way. And I think that's a huge first step, like to see like if you're coming closer to union is like being okay with or without them because you have worked on yourself, and just learning to let go and surrender, and know that too like you cannot it's something that you can't really choose your own autonomy either. Like once you heal and you understand that, like even coming back into union, we have to understand that we have to let everything go. Like we can't be like, well, you did that 6 months ago. Like no, we have moments we're still navigating, but we're choosing divine intervention, divine union, and not like outside energies to affect the union. And that love is a frequency to maintain. It's not something that you can just like check in and out of. Once you heal individually and you come into union, it's still something you need to maintain. It's a frequency you need to maintain. It's not just going to be like rainbows, you know, like, but there's this newfound of freedom of clarity and purification that comes with coming back together, and it's worth every minute of it.
Thank you. I just love listening to you, both of you. So
Thanks.
I'm going to put your details in the description, and you said you are happy for people to reach out, perhaps
Yeah.
provide coaching, mentoring, support, whatever they need. I think it's very important what you just said, Cameron, which was about even after union, you got to do the work. You got to do the inner
Mhm.
work and the self love and all that kind of stuff. Otherwise, things go back to, they can, you got to keep going deeper.
Yeah.
So, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. I know you weren't very well today as well, but you still
Yeah.
showed up
Thanks.
and you've got children, downstairs. And I'm really grateful. Thank you very much, Cameron and Tarell.
Thank you for
Thank you. We
having
just want to let
us.
everyone know that it's worth it.
Yeah.
The journey is worth every second. It's beautiful.
And I was like, now have a kiss before I end the end the video. There we go. Thank you.